answer your questions that you have about video games, how to get into it, any of that kind of stuff. We good? Okay, so here's what I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask each of these students to introduce themselves, the college they go to, the program that they're in, their experiences, any type of video game that they've worked on so far, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound good? Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Hi, my name is Chudi. I'm Nigerian. International student. I currently school at Texas A&M University. I have a background, my first degree was in architecture. I also have a master's in environmental design. Okay, better. Yeah, so I'm currently doing a degree in visualization, like I mentioned before at the School of Performance and Visual, Performance Visualization and Fine Arts. It's a new school we just founded. So currently studying visualization. I'm about to graduate this summer, so yay. My experiences so far, it's, seeing I have a background in architecture, I already had some prior experience with 3D models and building structures. So I kind of already had some kind of, I want to say an advantage or like some knowledge of 3D modeling. So it kind of helped me in my program. I've learned a lot about game development, a lot about 3D modeling, world building. I'm currently interested in performance capture as well as some aspects of world building. I haven't currently made any games. In school we work on game prototypes, but I haven't published any games so far. Hopefully soon. Yeah, that's pretty much like the basics. Hopefully, I guess over time I'll reveal more. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sergio Alonso Macias. I am currently a first-year graduate student, also at Texas A&M University, also in the School of Performance Visualization and Fine Arts. And I specialize in 3D modeling and animation, and so that's what I do with video games, just to make it short.
My name is Emmanuel Tab. I'm an undergraduate student at Prairie A&M University, and next fall I will be attending Texas A&M University in the visualization program along with these two. My background in games, I participated in the Chilenium Game Jam where we spend 48 hours to make a game. So I have experience working on a game as a team. I've created a few games on my own, but I'm leaning more towards VR, virtual reality, and I want to use that to create tools for medicine. So in terms of like virtual surgeries, the students could prepare themselves for the actual thing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Hobson. I'm a fourth-year digital media arts student at Prairie View A&M University. I got into like gaming at like a younger age. I always wanted to like try to incorporate that into like my own like passion, and so I found a major that I was really comfortable with and really just really open with. And I actually made a game this semester. It was a fighting game called Angolio Warriors of Time. I wanted to make like because I know there's always a big in diversity in gaming, so that's kind of what I wanted to tackle with. And I made 4 African warriors, but yeah, and also you can actually play it in the gymnasium if you want to. That's it.
Awesome. Okay, do we have anybody that has any questions? You want to start off with some questions? If not, I got some. Now feel free. Yes, sir.
What's the most difficult thing about gaming?
Okay, that's a good question. Now, the question was, what is the most difficult thing about gaming, right? Okay. I'm gonna assume you mean game development, like making games, right? Okay, yes. It kind of also depends on your background. because for every game you have the artistic side and you also have the programming, the coding side. So I guess if you come from a background of maybe engineering, software engineering, or you have prior experience in code, you might find the artistic side more challenging, and vice versa if you have more of an artistic background. Personally, for me, coming from a background already knowing about building 3D models and the art side of it, so it was more challenging understanding code and how the logic behind games, how to make it work. So I guess it all depends on your perspective and the angle or the level of experience you have coming in. But definitely when it comes to making games, it's more of a marriage between the art and the computing side of it. Yeah.
So this is a really good question. Everything that said Shooty is pretty on point, but another thing that I find really difficult is just making sure that everyone on the team is communicating clearly, because like Shooty said, there is both an artistic and a technical side, but if one side or the other isn't communicating well with the other, then production gets really difficult. And so you have to make sure that communication is very clear. I've been in some projects where communication was very rough, and so we weren't able to get some of the stuff done that we wanted. And that also goes into time management. If you don't manage your time wisely, if you don't meet deadlines, if if it takes too long to do something, for example, and then you don't communicate that you're not going to be able to do it on time, then that ruins a lot of stuff. And so I'd say that if it's done well, then it's going to be really beneficial, time management and communication, but it can also be really hard. So.
I also agree with Shooty and Sergio. If you're working from a team perspective, communication could be the hardest thing in making sure everyone gets their part of the project done on time. If you're working as an individual developer, from my experience, the hardest thing is, I guess, trying to overcome the obstacle of something not working in terms of the code. So I guess trying to find better alternatives to what you already have.
So I would have to agree with what everyone said. Time management is definitely a thing to look for, and also working in groups. But for me individually, I think the hardest part for me is like actually coming up with the idea. 'Cause I feel like, I feel like in gaming, it always has to have like a deeper meaning, and I feel like that really takes like a longer time to come up with, and everything else will probably flow with it.
So speaking to that a little bit, what they've said is exactly true. It is really difficult, or it can be difficult to work on a team. The more people you have, the more personality you have that you have to learn how to work with, and sometimes that can be a challenge. Stepping away from the team aspect, let's talk about what it actually takes to make a game, right? Because I think that's a lot of what your question is too, right? How difficult is it to learn how to play a new game? Exactly. So let's take that. You said that it's difficult to learn to play a new game because you have to figure out the controls, right? So as a developer, you have to try to make those controls easy to pick up, right? So anybody can just take the controller, anybody can go to the keyboard, and they can just learn how to play it pretty quick. You don't want them to have to take weeks to learn how to play the game, right? You're going to get bored. You don't want to play it anymore, right? If it took you 9 months to learn how the controls for Fortnite, would you want to play Fortnite? No. So you have to have that intuition. A lot of times we do that by using control schemes that are already used. On a gamepad, what do I use to attack? A. What about on PlayStation? Triangle? Sounds good. So I want to follow that same scheme for all of the other games also, right? So that when somebody picks up a controller, they can just start playing it. So let's talk a little bit about what all is involved in creating a game. You have different aspects of it, like were mentioned. We have programming, sound design, interface, art, animation, level design, and a myriad of ones that I'm not even coming up with right now. And all of those have to come together. In those areas, you have experts that know how to, they know how to program. They know how to create levels. And there's a science to each one of those. The bigger a company is, the more specialized those people can be. So if you have a large company like Gearbox Software, an animator is just going to animate. And you might even have an animator that just does motion capture, right? The more small a studio is, the smaller a studio is, you can't be as specialized. You have to be more general. So for programming in a small studio, you might have to be able to do gameplay and animation integration and rendering and all of those things, frame rate optimization, all of those things. You have to be good at multiple things. And so that's one of the reasons why video games take so long to make, because there's so many systems that have to integrate. There's so many systems that have to talk to each other and play with each other, and all of that content has to be created. And, you know, we're not machines. We can't work 24/7, right? Does that answer your question a little bit? Okay. All right. Any other questions?
So I was just curious, when you go from gaming simply for enjoyment and you decide to move into a career path and get education in it and it becomes more work, are you still able to go back and game for enjoyment the same way? How does that change your perspective on games that you go back and play for enjoyment?
That's a very interesting question, because I was literally having that same conversation with a friend. I was saying whenever I watch animated movies or I play games, I find myself kind of studying it, not just letting go and enjoying the experience. Well, yeah, it is something I guess you would have to account for, I guess. You kind of understand that if you are going into that industry, watching animated movies or playing games that make it like AAA games of that level, that gives you some sort of reference to understand what is quality and what is out there in the market. So it's kind of inbuilt. You have to kind of study it to an extent, and maybe if it's kind of the experience you enjoy, you maybe if it's the level design or if it's the art style, you look at it, okay, why does this make me feel this way? Why do I enjoy it? So you kind of find yourself already studying it subconsciously. So, but at the same time, it is the love of games that got us here. So you kind of always have that enjoyment. It's always going to be there, but you kind of have to share it a little bit with your passion for making the games. So it is kind of the duality of the experience, I guess, and it's something you just have to get used to, pretty much.
Yeah, similar experience for me. I've actually been able to develop some projects, some games in some of the classes that I've taken at A&M, and working in the game development process was one thing, but playing games is definitely another. Just like Shudi said, you can definitely see the AAA games are quality, and then you can see, indie games, and then you can see some other games that aren't necessarily up to par in terms of like art or, gameplay flow and everything. But going from game development to gaming, for me, it's been a smooth transition just because I got into games early as well. I think the first video game I started playing was probably in kindergarten, and then I never stopped. But I do find myself studying them a lot more. It's similar with movies because what I'm doing, the 3D modeling and animation, is sort of the skills are interchangeable between the animation industry and the gaming industry. And so in addition to finding myself studying video games more, looking at the textures and everything, looking at the models, seeing how they flow in games, I also do the same thing in movies. And so you do have to tell yourself, why am I playing this? Why am I watching this? And so I just try to remember I'm just playing this to enjoy it. I can study it, but I'm trying to have fun. So I'm just gonna, push that to the side. Yeah.
For me personally, so we all have a heavy interest in video games. So once you start to make video games, you kind of go back to the games that you enjoy playing, and you kind of get inspiration from those games to do certain things. So I guess that would be the good side of making and playing video games, because if you enjoy video games, you're going to enjoy them even if you don't create your own games. So there is a balance between the two.
So yes, I would have to agree with what everyone said. For me, like when I'm playing like video games, it kind of inspires me to actually make that type of game or see like the movements and the animation and how they created it, like the poly, like just how they created it and just the characters in general.
So speaking to that same thing, there is absolutely a distinction between playing video games and making video games. If you love to play video games, that's what you want to do day in and day out. That does not mean that you're going to love making video games. Since I started making video games back in 2005, and I've been a part of, I think, close to 25 or 30 different games that have been released and some that haven't. It is extremely difficult for me to play a video game and just enjoy it, because having been part of the process where you're making a video game so many times, it's hard for me to not start analyzing the game. Oh, I wonder how they did that thing. Oh man, that thing looks awesome. I wonder how I would do that. Look at that animation. I'm breaking that down. Or, oh man, why did they go with that choice? I think this would have been so much better. So that's already, just me talking about that has taken away your interest of playing video games, right? So it's difficult for me, but sometimes I have to tell myself, look, you have to let all that go. Just enjoy what you're doing. You can analyze later. And we talk about this at the university a lot. Because we do have, and we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, we do have students that come in and they love to play video games. So if I love to play video games, it only makes sense that I'm going to love to make video games. And that is not the case for some of them. It's like, this is too much work for me. I didn't know it was going to be this much. I just want to play them. And so, unfortunately, you do have those students that lose interest in making them. For me, and I'm sure for you as well, one of the biggest joys that I have is someone enjoys playing a game that I had a part of. When you, or when I've been part of making a commercial, when I've animated part of a commercial for a video game trailer or something, and on YouTube it's gotten millions of views, or you see it on TV. To me, that's like, it makes all the frustration that you might have when you're trying to create a video game or whatever, makes it all worth it. To know that I've created something that you enjoy, to me, that's what I enjoy even more than playing a video game. Okay. Gotcha. I'm coming.
What type of coding do you do?
Okay, I can answer to an extent. I personally come from a zero coding background. As at 3 years ago, I had zero coding experience, but with the help of the Unreal Engine blueprint system, it's kind of a bridge for people who don't have an experience writing code. You could just use nodes and kind of implement code. So there's code in terms of typing out syntax, or there's also code in terms of like plugging nodes, the Unreal blueprint system. So in that context, that is the type of code I use. Is more of a bridge for artists to get into the development side of things, and it's pretty convenient and helpful. Yeah.
So coming from the artistic side, I don't really do much programming, but I have had to do it in the past. One of the programs that we work with is Autodesk's Maya, and so that program is basically just like Blender, which is another program which is like the same thing. It's an artist's best friend, and in that program you can use scripts which are usually either in Python or in C++, to make things in the environment for you. So because I'm on the artistic side, I would write some scripts that would help me generate like some random objects within the environment. But I haven't done much outside of that, just because, again, I am more focused on the artistic side. But this semester, I'm taking a VR class, and in that class, I've had to program with C++. I've had to program the controls of a VR application. And so the way that worked was that I would go into like the support program and then write the script in there and then implement it into the VR project. And so that would allow me to put on the VR headset, and then control the, whatever I see. But outside of that, I haven't done much.
So when I made my first game, I started off using C# and typing out each code line by line. So I kind of just stuck to that. But in the future, I do plan to incorporate some blueprints with my coding. So C# is the type of coding that I use.
So for me, I'm more on the artistic side. I am not really good with code. I know I have done C#, but I'm not really too familiar, except like the basics. But that's all. That's really all.
Okay, so let's talk about code versus programs. So for code, the three most utilized, at least in my experience, is C#, which is usually used with Unity, a game engine called Unity, C++, which is going to be more like Unreal and Frost. I think Unity is the most prevalent C#. Everybody else is pretty much C++. And Python. Now, Python is more what's called a pseudocode, is that it sits on top of other code and does stuff. So as far as code goes, those are the three most prevalent that I know of, C++, C#, and Python. Now, programs are a little bit different. Programs are typically what we use to create content that goes into a video game. So let's talk about the art side. Now, this might get a little bit much, and I'm not trying to overwhelm anybody. So for textures and materials, Photoshop right now is king, right? That's like the most used program in the industry is Photoshop. You also have a program called Substance Builder. Adobe, who owns Photoshop, bought out the company that does Substance Painter. Substance Painter, you can draw directly on your 3D models and stuff like that. So those are huge there. You also have programs like ZBrush and Mudbox, which we use for sculpting, like digital sculpting. Think about like if I was making a clay figure in a 3D program. That's what those do. ZBrush is more powerful than Mudbox, but Mudbox is in a suite by a company called Autodesk, and they have a ton of stuff. So modeling and animation, there are three big ones, okay? Maya, which you can do modeling and animation. You can also do you can paint in there if you want to. 3ds Max, which is also owned by Autodesk, and then Blender. Blender is huge because it's open source and it's free. So a lot of independent developers use Blender. And let's see. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm coming.
I actually have kind of two questions. One is, what's the hardest gaming genre to make? And then what's the hardest gaming genre or combination to do?
Interesting question. If I had to think what is the most difficult gaming genre to make, I would I say online multiplayer is a genre? Is that a genre in itself? Yeah, I don't know. Just for the singular fact that I have very little experience in that, I would probably say that would be the most difficult for me personally. But I guess it all depends on your level of experience and your expertise. But I would kind of assume making an online multiplayer game would kind of be complex or difficult. In terms of the combinations, I'm not quite sure I got the second part of the question. What was the second question?
More than one gaming genre, like adventure action or adventure puzzles, stuff like that.
Yeah, if you would be able to tell an adventure narrative in a non-linear way, where you could have like multiple endings, I guess that could increase the level of complexity, because the storytelling itself would be complex, aside the mechanics you're putting in. So that in itself could make for a very complex game to kind of make.
To answer your first question, I think about replayability, because if you're developing a game, ideally you want players to play it more than just once, right? So for example, if you developed Fortnite or Minecraft, you want to make it fun, You want to make sure that the users can do a lot of stuff in them, and then you want to make sure that they can stay on it, right? Because you're not going to just put in thousands of hours of work into a game just for it to, be thrown away after 2 hours. And so, in line with that thought, I think it's really difficult to make horror games because with horror, the novelty comes in the jump scares, in the storytelling, in the way that the users interact with the environment. And so, for example, if it's a campaign horror, you run through the game once, and then you already know what to expect. And so, with a horror game, you want the player to get scared, but if they've already played it through, and it's a linear story, one that doesn't branch out or anything, one that just follows a straight line, then the player knows what to expect, and the novelty of the fear brushes away. And so I think it's a trade-off, because if the first run-through is a memorable experience, is memorable enough, then the work will have been worth it. But if it's not, then, there you go. And to answer your second question, this isn't really a mix of genres, but I think it's really difficult to make a multiplayer game that features a campaign, especially these days. Because if you think about it, a lot of games that are free to play now are mostly just multiplayer, and they don't really feature a single player or co-op campaign. So, for example, one of the ones that does generally is the Call of Duty series. I know Modern Warfare 2 just came out last year, and the multiplayer is a whole thing on its own, and it's still supporting Warzone, so that's two things that they had to develop. And then they also still had to continue the story of the first campaign, which is like 3 different things, which is a lot of work. And so I think it's really difficult to make games that feature more than just multiplayer.
So Sergio kind of just took my answer, but I would say that Call of Duty games are, in my opinion, I think they would be harder to make because you would want a game with a good storyline, but also have good action as well. So I say that to say online genre may be the hardest because you might have server issues. Has been gaming companies or games themselves that people hack. So I think server issues might be the hardest thing to overcome in terms of making a game.
So I would have to agree with everyone. Well, like any online game would probably be really hard. Also, maybe RPGs, because I have seen it and I feel like there's a lot going on for just like there's cinematics and there's turn-based RPGs and another other different RPGs. That would probably and also fighting games too, because you have to be able to know when to hit like the actual hit boxes and be able to take a hit, and it's just a lot of code into making those type of games.
So I would agree. In my opinion, fighting game is probably the hardest. The reason why is, one, you have a lot of combinations, so you have to collect that data from the controller instantly. The biggest thing, in my opinion, that makes a fighting game hard is because the player requires instant feedback. If I press a button, I want to instantly do something. And when you have combinations, and now we might have games that have a 10, 20 button combination to do one move. Well, I have to keep track of all that, and then as soon as it happens, that player requires instant feedback. So your game has to be really optimized. Your code has to be super efficient so that you can track all of those moves. And then if you think about, each player has a unique style. So for animations, if let's just say that you have 10 players and each player has 100 different moves. Well, now you've got to create, how many would that be? As you have 100 per character, right? And if you have 10 characters, you're talking 1,000 animations that you've got to create. And that's just like your basic moves. What about your combos? What about your special moves? And those moves have to be able to blend seamlessly into each other. So in my opinion, I think fighting games would be the hardest genre. My opinion about the hardest game would be a game, that comes after, so like a part 2 or a part 3 or a part 4. If the first game does really well, then of course you want to carry on that momentum. right? You want the second game to do well. You want the third game to do well. You want the fourth game to do well. It gets progressively more difficult to create a game that's based on another one before it for it to do as well, if not better. A player comes to expect certain things. So like for Halo, you expect the same type of art style, you expect the same type of assets, the continuation of the story. So it's really hard to deviate away from that, right? If you start, oh, I've got this really good idea, but it has nothing to do with the ring world, nothing. Well, automatically some of your players are going to pull back from that. And to be honest, players are kind of fickle. They like what they like and they don't like what they don't like, and there's not much of a gray area there. So it's really difficult to hit that mark. You're always trying to hit at a moving target for a game that's going to be successful. Okay, who else has a question? Okay, so we'll go here. Okay, we'll go.
So, what is the most hardest game that y'all have ever created?
The hardest game that you've ever created? Is that right?
Okay. I haven't published any games yet, but I have made a couple of prototypes. And there was a game jam competition we had like a year ago, the Chilenium. We made a VR. I made a VR game with a couple of friends in 48 hours. That was quite challenging because of the time frame. We only had 48 hours to create all our assets, all our art drawings, and all the coding, and get it ready for playing by the judges in pretty much 48 hours. So that was, I would say, the biggest challenge I've had in terms of time scale and having to get everything ready on time.
So I've worked on a couple of games while at school, but the hardest one I think was this game we made called Dusty. And so the game is about a beaver who lives in this wonderful magical world, but then it gets attacked by a giant beaver. And so the thing that was difficult about that was deciding what to prioritize. And so originally what we wanted to do was we wanted to include three levels, three different environments, but because of our scheduling, because of our timeline, we had to cut that down significantly. And so we ended up going from 3 levels to 1 level, and even then we still had to refine the gameplay, and we still had to make sure that it was fun. And that was a combination of like 3D platformer and first-person shooter. So that aspect was pretty difficult as well.
So the hardest game I've ever worked on was also at a game at Chilenium. Justin and I worked on the same team along with some of our other classmates. And the hardest part was, I guess, trying to make the game. It was my first time doing coding, well, a heavy load of coding for a game within a short period of time. So it took a lot of research and watching videos and trial and error to overcome to create the game. I can't remember the name of it. Do you remember the name of it? But yeah, the game at Chilenium was the hardest game.
So for me, the same as Emmanuel. The hardest game was at the game jam. It was just really hard to like actually come up with the idea, and everyone wanted like the same idea, because some people had other ideas and others didn't, and it was just really hard as a team to come up and create a game, because I think that was all 4 of us, like our first time actually making a game. So it was really difficult. The coding, the actual creating the characters, the environment, all of it was just really difficult.
So if you had somebody in your family that's in the games industry, maybe this answer is different, but when you told your parents, hey, I want to go to school and learn how to make games, what was the reaction, and how did you deal with it?
Yes, it was a very interesting challenge, to say the least. my case is a bit unique in the sense of, like I said, when I was back in Nigeria, I studied architecture. I practiced for a little bit, so I had some level of independence. But it still took my dad a couple of years to be convinced that going into gaming was feasible. I literally had to convince him. I had to show my determination by actually saving for school some of the money myself. So when he sees some of the determination in you, then he does his research and sees, okay, this is a feasible career. But from the get-go, it was, why would you want to leave architecture, and go into gaming? Because I guess most parents kind of operate with the idea of economics, of what is going to make you money. Then I guess your passion would come in second. So it usually is a case of trying to convince them that your passion can actually satisfy the economics, or can be an actual livelihood, a source of livelihood. Sorry. So it did take, I would say, being conservative, like 2 years to convince my dad that, okay, this is cool, and you can actually go for it. Yes.
So for me, I think I was very lucky in the sense that my parents are pretty progressive in the way that they think about creative careers, because it wasn't unusual for me to hear about a bunch of my friends who wanted to pursue these, creative careers, but ended up having them shut down by their parents because they didn't think that they could have a job or make money or anything. But I understood the importance of letting my parents know about that. So before I told them that I wanted to go into game design, animation, I told them, well, I did my research, and then I let them know, hey, this is a job, it's pretty nice, and I would be doing what I love. And then I got a pretty easy yeah from that. So I was really fortunate in that way. Yeah.
So I did not have any backlash in terms of telling them I wanted to make video games. In the beginning, I didn't know I wanted to make video games. I just know I wanted to come to college and do coding. So when I had the opportunity to make video games, and I told them about it, they were pretty understanding because I spent hours upon hours playing video games growing up. So, and they were very aware of these $1 million gaming tournaments, and they understand that somebody has to make these games that are being played in these tournaments. So they were very supportive.
I guess for me, for my parents, they were just happy I was out the house, because at first I didn't know what I wanted to be and wanted to do, because I was just going to work and going to community college, and then I stumbled upon Prairie View A&M University and found a great program, digital media arts, and I now wanted to create games, and now I'm here. I'm finally graduate next week, so yeah.
I've actually got a pretty good story about this, if I could share it. My father is old, and I'm old, but not as old as he is. In his whole life, he has worked with his hands. He's been a master mechanic. He started his own business when I was in middle school, building furniture. So soon after he started his business, when I was in middle school, I was now working for the business. And I did that up until I was in college, working for his business. And I started off college in pre-med. I wanted to be a doctor, and I had wanted to be a doctor since I was young, until I hit college chemistry. Then I thought, maybe this doctor thing isn't for me. So I switched to computer science, and I graduated with a computer science degree. Before I had graduated, though, my brother and I had played video games as much as our family would let us. And so one day now also this business that my father had built, he had let it slip to his mother, to his wife, my mom, who let it slip to my brother and I, that his plan for the business was for us to take it over. And neither one of us wanted to do that. We didn't like this business. So in the email, one day I got a letter from my father, which I know, a letter. And in that was a newspaper clipping, which I know, a newspaper clipping, about a program that Southern Methodist University was starting up called the Guild Hall. And the whole purpose of the Guild Hall were to take students and teach them how to make video games. Now, I had always loved playing video games, but for some reason, it had never even entered into my mind that somebody made these video games and that I could possibly do that. And it really floored me that my father, who had worked with his hands his entire life, sent me a newspaper article about this program in Richardson. So I went and I met with them. And when the time came, I applied for it, and I got into it, and I graduated from the Guildhall. I graduated on a Friday and started my first career with Gearbox Software that next Monday. I had done 2 internships with them during my studies at SMU, and I got a master's degree doing it. So I still don't think that my father and my mother really understand what I do. And to be honest, I don't think they care. What it has allowed me to do is to have a career, not a job, but a career. I've been able to raise my family on this career. I have since moved, my primary occupation isn't video games so much anymore. Now I'm working at the University of Texas at Arlington to teach other students how to make video games. That right now, that is my passion. I still have my company, and we still do video games, but my primary passion is bringing those students up. I had a professor, his name is Professor Brubaker at the University, at SMU, and one of the first things he said, and one of the first classes that I took, is that he wants to be a part of the next stars. He wants to be the one that brings the next best game, the next best superstar. He wants to be a part of bringing them up and giving them the tools that they need. And at the time, I was like, man, you're brilliant. It doesn't make any sense to me that you don't want to make video games. But I have since come into that same understanding. I want to be a part of the education that the next superstar comes through. I want to be part of that next game because of the influence and the impact that I was able to have on students that came through our program. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Okay. You have a question? Okay.
Hopefully I can wrap it up on this one, but all right, so I want to ask this question. The direction I hear a lot of was indie. Y'all have done a lot of 48 hours. I love that you're doing the fighting game. At this stage, would you go keep pursuing indie, or are you in the pursuit of going into senior or entry level careers? So I'll go ahead and start with you, man.
Okay, yes, the idea of some of us working on indie games, I think there's some context to it because these are generally school-funded programs where we have the Chilenium. It's like a game jam. So I guess the opportunity hasn't been, because we're still in school. So most of what we work on right now are indie-level games. But yes, I would like to get into industry and I guess get some experience, while also maybe as a passion project, you could work on indie games on the side. But just at the level we are at right now, we just kind of getting a feel of the indie scope, I guess. But it would be cool to get into industry.
Yeah, I pretty much have the same goal. Right now, I think if you have the opportunity to get into like indie game dev, you should definitely do it just so you can get the game development experience. But with my skill set, what I'm trying to do is I want to get into the game industry, ideally, at an entry-level position. That way I can build my skill set further and then just move on up from there. Because I've heard of a lot of game studios letting their teams learn a bunch of different skills, and so I want to start with what I know now, but I definitely want to grow it and then ideally stay at a studio.
So for me, I would like to go into the industry for as long as I can and get the knowledge and experience of creating these video games. But on the flip side, I would want to go indie because I have ideas that I would like to bring to life, and I feel like I want to be the person that brings that out on my own. Not saying that it wouldn't be a good idea for a company to do it, but I kind of want to be the person that brings it to light. Yeah.
So for me, I kind of want to still do. I want to do indie, but I know if I was going to the actual game industry, I would probably learn more skills. But on the other hand, I'm making my own creation and my own like thing and my own team. I also wanted to actually make my own game studio if I'm able to one day. So yeah.
So talking about your point a little bit, by far the easiest way to make a game is to do an independent game. There's a lot of software out there that's free, and there's a lot of opportunities and tutorials and things like that on YouTube and the like that can help you to learn a lot of the skills that you need. Now, I'm not saying that's the only route you need to go and that college isn't important or anything. I'm not saying any of that. And we can definitely talk about why I feel that college is immensely important if you want. But if you have your own idea and you want to do your own thing and you understand that the majority of the work is going to be on you, then independent is good. It can be really good. There's a low cost of entry. You can get most of your software for free. Most of the input is just your time. That's where a lot of it comes from. It takes a lot of time to make a game, and if you're making an independent game with you and another person, realize that you're going to be working on this game for several years. AAA games take several years, and you're trying to make an independent one, so there is a time requirement in there. There are a lot of independent games that have done extremely well. That Dragon Cancer, Super Meat Boy. There's a ton of them that we can come up with. However, the vast majority of your market share is in your AAA games, right? Your Halos, your FIFAs, your NFLs, your NBAs, all of those games that are coming out from AAA titles, that's the majority of where the money is made. So a lot of people want to work there. So in order for you to be viable to work at a company like that, you have to have that skill set, right? It's not going to be easy for you to come in, I know a little bit of modeling. Okay, well, we got this guy over here that's been doing it for 5 years. Why should we look at you? That type of thing. So getting into like a AAA company is harder. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from doing that. That's a wonderful goal to have, but just know that there is work that you're going to have to do. And if you're not willing to do that work, somebody else is. All right, so we have a little bit of time. What I would like to do is ask a question, just one last question, a quick question, to kind of talk about your program, kind of the things that you like about your program, how your program is preparing you for the industry.
Yes, I think the visualization program we have, one of the benefits I see from it is the flexibility you are kind of given to kind of determine your specialty, I guess. So visualization in itself is somewhat all-encompassing. I get that question a lot of what is visualization. Whenever I tell a friend I'm studying visualization. So you could be interested in 3D animation. You could be interested in game development. You could be more into VR or AR or just some other forms of digital media. But you kind of have that freedom. And it's freedom, but at the same time, it's a responsibility to be able to define your path and choose the courses that you think fit best for you. So that flexibility, and at the same time, just being able to source for information amongst your peers. We kind of have a wide range of students at the school, so there's a lot of context and perspective that comes into the melting pot, I guess. So, but the highlight for me would be that flexibility in terms of your course management and how you define your program. It's because my experience, depending on the classes I take, might be different from his, but we're all still under the same umbrella, and you kind of have that leeway, I guess, to find your path. So that's one thing I kind of appreciate.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Shudi said, visualization, I was in the undergraduate program and now I'm in the graduate program. Something that it offers is just this general wealth of knowledge. If you want to do modeling, for example, then you can take some modeling classes, and then you can also just learn from your peers. If you want to do VR, there's a VR class. If you want to do AR. If you want to do texturing, there's a texturing class. And so something that I really appreciate about the program is just, in addition to the wealth of knowledge that the classes provide, it's the people that are in it, because if you don't have people, you don't have a program. And I was talking to Trudy and to Tim yesterday about some of the people that are in my cohort this semester or this year, and just knowing the talent that there is in the program is really reassuring, because it shows that, you know, not only are you interested, all these people are interested, and all the things that they know can be added on to the stuff that you know, just as long as you're open to talking to them. The program is really flexible in that way, and you can definitely choose what you want to do. You can choose what focus you want to go into, and then, of course, since everything under visualization is under the same umbrella, a lot of skills are interchangeable. So, for example, if you want to do a little bit of VR development, but you're more on the artistic side, you could definitely make assets for a VR application, and vice versa. If you're more VR oriented, then you can definitely use that to showcase the assets that someone else made. If you want to do game development, but you're more into programming, then you can program for game development, but you can also program for art. And so that would be a technical artist sort of thing. And so I think there's something that I really like about the program is the interchangeability of the skills and the people that are there and the knowledge that's available.
So our program is called Digital Media Arts, and we kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of we learn how to design our websites for our games we may create. We learn how to create posters for advertisements, flyers for social media. So we get that, we get to dip our hand in creating things that isn't directly game related. But on the other hand, we do learn how to do the coding, how to do the character design, the animations. So we get the whole mixing pot within our major. So that's what I enjoy about it.
So kind of the same with what Emmanuel said. It's also a really good like networking, like the people in your major, like it's like a little family. Like you just know everyone, and it's just a great major. Because at first I didn't know what I wanted to do. So when I got into this major, I didn't know what to expect, and it was just a great experience overall these 4 years. And I would definitely, if I could, I would do it all over again.
Oh, there we go. Awesome. Thank y'all so much. We want to thank A&M and Prairie View for coming up and sharing their experience with, and our amazing MC. Thank you so much. I do want to announce, if we have any students in here that are a part of the student showcase, if you will head to the 7th grade hallway and get set up. I think a majority of them are there, but I just wanted to double check. Anybody else? Okay, well then they should be set up. So if you guys want to go sample some of the work that our kids have done this school year, they are in the 7th grade hall in that very first part of the wing. They're going to have some great projects for y'all to check out. And then we also have Trey Thompson with the Dallas Mavericks Gaming that is speaking now in the library. So thank y'all so much.
We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore like we used to do. We don't laugh anymore. What was all of it for? Ooh, we don't talk anymore like we used to do. I just heard you found the one you've been looking for. I wish I would have known that wasn't me. 'Cause even after all this time, I still wonder All right. So we got the student showcases going on right now. Also, we still have our silent disco going. Our gaming tournament has been pushed back. We're going to move it. It is now starting at 12:45. So that means our cosplay judging has been moved back. So cosplay judging has been moved back to 1:15. And our gaming tournament has been moved back to 12:45. So just making sure you know those announcements.
We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore. We don't talk anymore like we used to do. We don't laugh anymore. What was all of it for? Oh, we don't talk anymore like we used to do. Just you wearing tonight. If you're giving it to you just right, the way I did before. I overdosed. Should've